Two kings stand in the Klondike. One rules with old iron, the other rules with new machines. The first king is Tony Beets. He built an empire with brute force. His machines are relics. They are giants of steel. They are rusted. They move rivers. They tear through rock. His dredges groan and shudder, casting long shadows across the scarred earth. They are a testament to a time when will alone was enough to conquer the North. His vision is one of sheer scale. It is loud. It is messy. It is undeniable. It leaves a mark on the land that will last for generations. The second king is Parker Schnabel. He is younger. His kingdom is built on data. It is built on precision. His machines are fast. They are modern. They are sleek. His wash plants hum with a quiet power. They use sensors. They use computers. They sift gold from gravel with minimal waste. His work is surgical. It is neat. It is methodical. It aims to extract wealth while leaving a small footprint. His vision is smart strategy. At first, the rivalry was loud and public. Now it has gone quiet. It has become sharp. It has become cold. It has become hidden. It lives in papers and closed-door deals. It hides in a secret file. That file is called the Yukon Accord. The contrast is a story in itself. It is the story of an industry at a crossroads. The old ways, Beets' colossal aging fleet, speak of a romantic, defiant past. They are symbols of raw ambition and the untamed frontier spirit. They required grit. They required muscle. They required a willingness to fight the land itself. The new ways, Schnabel's streamlined operation, speak of a calculated corporate future. They are symbols of efficiency. They are symbols of environmental consciousness. They are symbols of a belief that technology can tame the wilderness. It was about the soul of the Klondike. This quiet war is not fought with shouts across creek beds anymore. It is fought with clauses in contracts. It is waged with permit applications. It is waged with regulatory hearings. The battlefield has moved from muddy pay dirt to the sterile boardroom. The stakes are higher than ever. It is no longer about a single season's gold total. It is about who gets to write the rules for the future of the region. The Yukon Accord is the weapon quietly forged to settle this conflict. A silent coup. One king would be given the keys to the kingdom. The other would be locked outside the gates. The story begins with a file. It is a simple manila folder. A red stamp marks its cover. Top secret. Inside rests a document. Its title sounds official, almost mundane. The Yukon Accord. Beets Water License Resolution, 2025. The paper is short, just a few pages, but its impact is immense. It arrived in the dead of night, a leak from a source deep within the territorial government. It appeared without warning on a small, independent mining blog. The document was presented as an answer to a very public problem. Tony Beets was facing an environmental crisis. His operations had led to significant fines and public anger. Many feared a long, ugly court battle that would tarnish the Yukon's reputation. The Accord presented itself as a swift and clean solution. It was a backroom deal, hammered out away from the press and public scrutiny. It offered a path for all parties to avoid a protracted legal war. The government could claim it was protecting the environment. Tony Beets could avoid the crushing weight of potentially ruinous fines and a possible suspension of all his operations. On the surface, it seemed like a reasonable compromise, a necessary evil to keep the industry moving forward. It was framed as a resolution. But a closer reading reveals a different story. It was not a resolution. It was a realignment of power. It uses bureaucratic terms to mask its true intent. Resolution, compliance, mitigation. Yet, behind this veil of administrative jargon lies a ruthless strategy. The document outlines a deal where one man's empire is carefully dismantled. Another's is given the tools to expand without limit. It was a political masterstroke, creating the appearance of responsible governance while executing a quiet corporate takeover. The secret nature of its creation speaks volumes. Deals made in the light are for the public good. Deals made in the shadows are for private gain. This was a deal made in the shadows. The existence of such a document sent a tremor through the tight-knit mining community. Whispers started in the bars of Dawson City. Miners who had worked the Klondike for decades felt a shift in the ground beneath their feet. This was not the usual rough-and-tumble competition they were used to. This was different. This was the hand of government and capital working in concert to pick a winner. The top-secret stamp was not just for show, it was a warning. It signified that the fate of the Klondike was being decided by a select few, far from the eyes of those whose lives would be most affected by the outcome. The folder held more than paper, it held the future. The Yukon Accord, for all its secrecy, was built on 3 simple but devastating rules. First, it ordered the immediate and indefinite suspension of Tony Beets's primary water licenses. These licenses were the lifeblood of his operation. They were the permits that let him run massive pumps. They were the permits that let him run sluices. They kept his iconic dredges working. Without water, the dredges are museum pieces, unable to move, unable to dig, unable to produce a single ounce of gold. This clause crippled his income-generating enterprise. A surgical strike on the heart of his kingdom, leaving the old king powerless. Second, the accord confined Tony Beets to the margins. He could keep a handful of non-producing claims, plots with little or no water access, prospecting grounds, not viable mines. His children were allowed small, limited operations. Crucially, he was forbidden from expanding into new, productive ground. He was boxed in, an illusion of mining, no real competition at the top. Exiled to the backwaters while the main event moved on. Third, the accord gave Parker Schnabel a golden ticket. It granted him priority approval for all new land and water rights applications, an unprecedented advantage. Others faced months or years of delays. Parker got a fast pass. The priority applied to parcels directly adjacent to Beets' fallow claims. In one move, the government hobbled one player and cleared the path for his rival to absorb the territory. On paper, the Yukon Accord was a document of compromise. It appeared to save the government from a messy legal battle. It saved Tony Beets from public humiliation and the threat of massive fines. It promised to protect the fragile northern ecosystem. It was presented as a win for compliance and environmental stewardship. Yet the results on the ground told a very different story. This was not a compromise. It was a carefully orchestrated transfer of power. Beets was spared the harshest penalties, but he was neutered. His operation slowed to a crawl and confined to unproductive land. He was a king in name only, stripped of authority and territory. The real winner was Parker Schnabel. He didn't just avoid trouble, he was actively rewarded. While Beets was boxed in, Parker was given freedom to expand. He faced no fines. He received priority permits. The accord was not a fair split of consequences and rewards. It was a calculated plan that moved the throne without a single shot being fired. Publicly, environmental responsibility. Privately, consolidation of power in a new favorite. The Klondike goldfields had witnessed a coup most didn't notice. Signs of the silent takeover appeared almost immediately. Mining blogs, fed by anonymous leaks, became the front line. Headline: Beets insider claims. The king was set up. A day later, Parker's clean mining model is the future of the Yukon. These narratives split the small towns. Old-timers felt betrayed, defending Beets' legacy. They saw regulation used as a weapon to force a corporate takeover. Younger miners and environmental advocates celebrated a shift to sustainability. The community fractured. The land began to show the change. Official claim maps, stable for years, started to shift. A fault line appeared, dividing the territory. On one side, Beets' old claims, quiet, cold, machines idle. On the other, Parker's parcels growing, spreading like ink on a map. Onlookers saw Parker's equipment moving fence lines and survey stakes. New, state-of-the-art wash plants rose on what had been Beets' land. There were no confrontations. The Yukon Accord did more than just reassign land. It formalized an ideological split that had been growing for years. It drew a line in the dirt between two fundamentally different philosophies of mining. On one side stood Tony Beets, old-style brute force extraction. His world was one of raw power and intuition, moving mountains of earth, diverting rivers, wrestling gold from the ground with sheer mechanical might. His methods were direct descendants of the original Klondike gold rush pioneers. It was a philosophy that saw the land as an adversary to be conquered. Success was measured in tons of dirt moved. Success was measured in ounces of gold recovered, with little regard for the mess left behind. On the other side stood Parker Schnabel, the champion of a new data-driven approach. His world was one of planning, testing, efficiency. Before a single bucket of dirt was moved, his team conducted extensive geological surveys, ground-penetrating radar, core sampling, digital mapping. His operation was designed to maximize recovery, minimize fuel consumption, minimize water usage, minimize environmental impact. It was a philosophy that saw the land as a complex system to be understood and managed. Success was measured not just in gold. Success was measured in profit margins. Success was measured in operational uptime. Success was measured in regulatory compliance. The Accord became the legal instrument that validated one philosophy and condemned the other. By freezing Beets' water licenses due to environmental concerns, the government effectively declared his methods obsolete and unacceptable. The document implicitly stated that the era of moving rivers and leaving behind vast tailings, ponds, was over. The brute force approach was no longer sustainable environmentally. The brute force approach was no longer sustainable politically. Beets became a symbol of a past the Yukon wanted to leave behind. His iron giants, once symbols of progress, were recast as relics of a destructive age. He was made an example of what would no longer be tolerated. In contrast, Parker's priority approval status was a clear endorsement of his methods. The government was rewarding his investment in technology. The Yukon Accord was not just a business document, it was a wedge driven into the heart of the community. In the small towns that dot the Klondike, where everyone knows everyone, the deal created quiet but deep divisions. People who had been friends for decades suddenly found themselves on opposite sides of an invisible line. The debate was rarely spoken aloud in public. It festered in private conversations, knowing glances across the local diner. The sudden silence when a certain name was mentioned. The camps were drawn. You were either for the old ways or the new. You were with Beets or with Parker. The Accord also had a profound impact on the people who watched the Klondike from afar. For years, television shows had painted a specific picture of this world. Fans had come to see Tony Beets as a force of nature. He was the loud, stubborn, often profane, patriarch who bent the land to his will. His giant machines were characters in their own right, symbols of a defiant, romantic struggle against the wilderness. For these viewers, the Accord felt like a tragedy. It was the story of a folk hero being brought down, faceless bureaucrats, and a younger, colder rival. It was the end of an era they had grown to love. Conversely, another group of fans felt a sense of excitement and vindication. The Yukon government, if ever pressed, would defend the Accord with a simple and powerful narrative. They would say it was a responsible act of governance. They would argue that it was their duty to protect the land and water for future generations. They would point to Tony Beets' history of environmental violations as clear evidence that action was needed. A long, drawn-out court battle, they would claim, would have served no one. It would have cost taxpayers millions of dollars and left the future of a major mining operation in limbo for years. The Accord, they would insist, was a pragmatic solution to a difficult problem. This narrative acts as a political shield. By framing the issue entirely around environmental compliance, the government deflects any accusation of favoritism. They can present themselves as impartial referees, enforcing the rules of the game for the good of all. They will highlight the cleaner sites and the reduction in legal disputes as proof that their strategy is working. The success of Parker Schnabel's expanding operation can be held up as a model for the entire industry. This is what happens when you follow the rules, the government can say. This is the reward for responsible mining. The story is clean, simple, and easy to defend. But critics of the deal see a different story behind this political shield. They see the law being used not as a tool for justice, but as a weapon to reshape an industry. They argue that the government did not act impartially. Instead, they used the leverage of Beets violations to engineer a desired outcome. They saw an opportunity to remove a difficult, non-compliant operator and replace him with one who was younger, more media-savvy, and more willing to play by the new rules. The Accord, in this view, was less about protecting the environment and more about picking a winner who would make the government look good. This raises a troubling question about the nature of power. Can a regulatory body truly be neutral when its decisions can create or destroy fortunes worth hundreds of millions of dollars? The Accord demonstrates how a government can achieve a private sector outcome through public sector means. At its core, the Yukon Accord was a business transaction disguised as a legal resolution. An insider, a mining analyst who has followed the Klondike for 2 decades, offered a quiet but stark assessment. This is a corporate takeover that looks like law, the source said, speaking on the condition of anonymity. The government handed one side the legal cover to expand, while it put the other side in a regulatory cage. This comment cuts through the noise of environmental debates and public relations. It reframes the entire event not as a fight between two miners, but as a strategic acquisition facilitated by a powerful third party. The strategy was subtle but effective. The new model of mining, the Parker model, is one that wins public and political favor. It is presented as clean, scientific, forward thinking. By championing this model, the government can project an image of modernization and environmental responsibility. They can point to Parker's success as evidence that their policies are working. The cost of this public relations victory was the deliberate marginalization of an old guard operator who did not fit the new image. The Accord provided the perfect mechanism to make this happen. It used Tony Beets' own past mistakes as the justification to sideline him permanently. This event signals a fundamental change in how the game is played in the North. The old frontier mentality, where success was determined by grit, luck, the strength of your machinery, is fading. A new era of corporate-style mining is taking its place. In this new era, success is determined by your relationship with regulators. A final image helps to capture the new reality of the Klondike. Imagine a split frame. On the left is a portrait of Tony Beets. He stands before one of his idle dredges, his expression defiant but tinged with weariness. He looks like a king surveying a lost kingdom. He waits. On the right is a portrait of Parker Schnabel. He stands in front of a glowing computer monitor displaying geological maps, his expression focused and intense. He looks ready. He plans. Between their two portraits, set against a stark black background, sits a single large gold nugget. A deep crack runs down its middle, splitting it almost perfectly in two. The crack in that nugget runs like a fault line on a map. It shows one simple, hard truth. The gold, the very substance that should bind these men in a shared pursuit, now serves to divide them. The land that once offered limitless opportunity for anyone with enough grit is now a carefully partitioned chessboard. The Yukon Accord did not heal a fractured industry. It codified the fracture. It drew a line, not in the sand, but in solid rock. In a land where rules can be rewritten in secret, who truly holds the power? Please subscribe to our channel History Documentary Hub for more insightful videos and